I think you're going to want to hear this. The Maple Leafs have made a trade, and the Timothy Liljegren era is over in Toronto. We'll break down the return and what this means for the team moving forward. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Dave, a big deal just went down. Happy Thursday, by the way. Happy Halloween to everybody. And we were treated to a Timothy Liljegren trade on this wonderful day.
Yeah, a trade and treat.
A trade and treat. I like it.
Yeah.
I'll allow it. I like it. So Timothy Liljegren, after withering away up in the press box for a couple of weeks here, we've been talking about it ad nauseum, how he's really the key piece that the Leafs could move on from. He was someone who just didn't fit into their plans and was, taking up a lot of cap space and literally room in the press box. And the Maple Leafs seem to have felt that he just didn't really fit with what the roster was, trying to do moving forward, right? He became the most expendable piece on this roster. And there's a couple of guys who are getting healthy, and in order to activate them from long-term injured reserve, they had to make a move of some kind. And they finally made that move today, trading Timothy Liljegren to the San Jose Sharks. In return, the Maple Leafs get Matt Benning, a 2025 third-round pick, and a 2026 sixth-round pick. I'll be honest, Dave, I'm quite surprised that they're able to get, I wouldn't call it a haul, but that they're at least able to get, half decent value for a guy like Liljegren, who's sat out 9 of the first 10 games. We were talking on the pod yesterday how, the Leafs might have to attach a sweetener to Liljegren to get a team to take on the full freight. They find a taker in the San Jose Sharks. They do take on some money. Matt Benning does have a contract at $1.25 million this year and next year. But I mean, they still were able to pick up a third and a sixth. And Matt Benning, you could bury most of that contract and end up saving $2.9 million in cap space.
Yeah, that's the benefit, right? I know that, you see a guy who has a contract from here for this season and next season, but the fact that they can, if they decide it's a numbers game, they need to send someone down. Matt Benning is now an easier option. You could throw all that money into majority of that money to the AHL, and you're not dealing with the Liljegren situation. If you had to put him on waivers, and you're only able to bury 1.15.
Yes, exactly. Which yesterday I saw a lot of the comments on the YouTube channel tell us, when we were talking about giving up a sweetener to try and trade Liljegren or what it would take. A lot of people came out and said, just waive him. Why can't you just waive Liljegren and allow someone to take him for free? You can, but if he doesn't get waived and he ends up slipping through and goes to the minors, he would have been on the hook still for 1.9 or 1.85 million, I believe would have been the number. Like, he still would have been on the books for quite a lot. 3 million less 1.15. That's all that you could put in the minors. The rest would have still been on the books for cap reasons, and the Maple Leafs needed to get rid of the entire cap hit essentially in order to do what they got to do for LTIR. Which is why, I look at this deal, and I think that the fact that they're able to make a trade and actually get value, like a 2025 third-round pick, it's not a great return. It's not holy cow, knock your socks off. It's not like when they got a first-round pick for Rasmus Sandin. But, that third-round pick for a team that doesn't have a lot of draft picks could be valuable, not just to use to try and, stock up the prospect cupboard, but there's a lot of depth players that go for third-round picks at the deadline, and now you got one that you can play with. Right. So, you got rid of a contract and a player for the next 2 years that you just didn't believe in, that was making way too much money, and you brought in a guy who maybe he'll play in Matt Benning, I don't know, but you were able to somehow also get a couple of draft picks, one of which has decent value in being this year's third-round pick. Uh, I think it's a pretty solid trade from Brad Treliving.
Well, and yesterday, like last night, some of you may have noticed that there was a trade done with Utah and Detroit. When I saw that Utah was making a trade, I'm like, and then I saw it was with Detroit, I'm like, damn it! And it was for Oli Mata, right? Third round pick for a 30-year-old defenseman. I'm like, yeah, that was kind of the trade I was hoping the Leafs are going to be making with Utah, right? Even for a third round pick. And so, and we know that Utah was a team that needed a defenseman. So I'm a little surprised that Utah just didn't try to go out and make a deal like that for Liljegren. I know Mata's got more experience, but Liljegren's also younger. Same contract this year, next year too. That's the surprising part with the Mata deal. But then you see
What's Mata making? What's his cap hit though?
$3 million.
He's making $3 million also.
Yeah, for this year next.
Right.
So it's like it's the same exact contract, right? And so then you see the San Jose deal. And we were talking yesterday about destinations, and the destinations we were choosing, we didn't include San Jose because San Jose actually has quite a few defensemen. I mean, not great defensemen, but like there's a bit of a logjam there. So we
got a bunch of Liljegrens. That's the thing. They got a bunch of Liljegrens. So I guess I'm not that surprised. Like it's just another lottery pick dart throw, but we'll see how it plays out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean they're a team right now that, they got a guy like Cody Ceci, which they got in the deal with Edmonton, and I think Jan Ruda is on that team. I mean, whose best hockey was back when he was playing with Victor Hedman and the Lightning.
Yeah. They picked up Jake Wallman in a deal, a cap dump deal with Detroit earlier this year.
So, like, as you said, they're a team that they can afford to take a flyer on a Liljegren, right? And they're going to be a team that's going to trade out a few of those defensemen. And if you're Liljegren, if you can't make this San Jose Sharks blue line, if you can't get a lot of ice time there, I don't know. Like at that point, you're just like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, you might not be an NHLer. Like ultimately, you might not be an NHLer if that's the case. Like that's the honest to goodness truth. If he can't hack it in San Jose, not a very talented roster. No. You just might not be that good.
But San Jose just got their first win of the season this week. Just so you can get an idea of where. I mean, I know that Macklin Celebrini's hurt right now, but this is not a team that's competing, right? So
no,
but it's a good opportunity for him, like similar to when the Capitals traded for Sandin, right?
Yeah,
they had opportunity to give him, see what he can do. So this is the same thing for Liljegren.
Yeah, I think Sandin was a little younger at the time of the trade. Like Liljegren, is there still development left in his game, or is he kind of is what he is at this point? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Like I even if he turns out to be a serviceable, number 5, let's say, at some point for this team, I don't even think that Leaf fans would be too upset. Where it's like, can't believe they gave away Liljegren for basically nothing. I don't think he'll be good enough where Leaf fans are going to regret this trade.
That's I think the big one here. I know a lot of people, the big thing that's been talked about is the Leafs. It's another situation where they drafted defenseman with the first round pick, doesn't pan out, and now they're kind of trading pennies on the dollar. It's
like Sean Dursey was like another defenseman that the Leafs had taken, and they traded away after a couple of years, thinking, okay, this guy might not be good enough to play for us, and then he goes somewhere else and tears it up, right? Got a big contract this past summer.
I think the only difference with Dursey is at least when they traded for him, they got Jake Muzzin out of it. Now, right, that was the only bit. But again, it's one of those where there's an identity. There's something the Leafs are trying to achieve with the guys that they're drafting, developing currently. That those were part of the old regime. Just don't fit, right? They thought maybe with the opportunity that Liljegren might be able to do it with Berube, but it was clear, right? It was just clear that he was not going to fit with what Berube wants. So, you know what? Like, I know it's tough to see a deal like that happen because of what was invested in Liljegren, but at the same time, you've got much better players ahead of him, and that's the reality. And now you get some draft capital that's going to help you make a deal ahead, before the trade deadline if you need to go
Yeah.
out and use that third round pick. I know third round picks don't sound as sexy, but they do provide you with something if you
You
do
get a
need to
depth
go
player.
out.
You could get a depth player for a third round
Yeah.
pick. Like that's I think like Labushkin was
Well,
like
I
a
think
fourth round
Edmondson was
pick,
also
I
a
think.
third round pick. I think both of them were third round picks.
Yeah, so like you could still get a depth player and someone who could come in and help for sure with that. So, they'll be able to kind of recoup that. But Liljegren, that caps off the books, and that's exactly what they needed. I honestly would be surprised if Matt Benning sticks around. I don't know. I kind of maybe I'm dumb for assuming this, but I just kind of am just assuming that they're going to waive him and it allows them to create the ultimate cap flexibility because his contract's 1.25 for this year and next. You can bury 1.15 of that. So really only 100,000 of his contract would be against the cap, which means basically you are getting rid of 2.9 million of the $3 million of Liljegren's contract. So I kind of have a feeling that we're going to see Matt Benning get waived once Hawkenpaw's good to go.
Yeah, Hawkenpaw, Connor Dewar,
Yeah.
those guys. Like it feels like they are close. More so Dewar, right?
I think Hawkenpaw was at practice today. I thought I saw a story from David Alter today on the hockey news, and he was chatting with Hawkenpaw. So I think he was around the media, which suggests he's got to be close.
Yeah, he said sooner rather than later, just waiting for the doctors to give the green light.
Yeah, AKA waiting for the capologist to make a move so we can make the dollars and cents work now that the Liljegren trade has gone through. Wouldn't shock me if he miraculously gets activated to play tonight against the Kraken. Wouldn't shock me.
It would, it would depend on who gets waived, right? Because I think they still got to waive with Benning in. I think you got to
Matt
waive.
Benning. You can
Yeah,
waive
no,
Benning.
like you can waive them. I'm just saying, you'll know for sure that that is happening when you see guys put on waivers.
Yes, yeah. Somebody before 2 p.m. will be placed on waivers, I guess, to accommodate that. So we'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, Timothy Liljegren era over in Toronto. What was your favorite Timothy Liljegren memory, Dave?
Probably the game against the Wild last year or two, where the Leafs had like no defenseman playing, and him and Sandin were like the top pairing used.
Oh, he made the block shot in like the dying
Yeah.
second. Matt Murray was in net.
Those like they pulled
Yeah.
Sandy and Liljegren played like so many minutes that game, and it was probably his best game I had seen him as a Leaf.
Yeah, I kind of said that tongue in cheek, thinking that you would say the pizza against Montreal, maybe. But
I don't want to throw strays at the guy as he's
wow,
knocking
you
at the
know.
door.
That's sadly though, like that's part of the reason why he just was never able to flourish here in Toronto. He didn't have the trust of the coach when it mattered during the postseason. 3 years in a row, he found himself in the press box. He was an okay regular season, guy who could play on your third pair and in a pinch could move up your lineup a little bit. But ultimately didn't have the trust of the coach when it mattered. And that's like this team is at a point where they're ready to roll and they want to make a push and try and win games in the playoffs and play that style of hockey. If he couldn't hack it under Sheldon Keefe, he certainly ain't going to hack it under Craig Berube. And obviously, message has been sent loud and clear with him getting scratched 9 of 10 regular season games to start the year. I don't think he would have had a sniff in the playoffs. So getting out from that contract, getting a couple draft picks in return for it, and another depth defenseman in Matt Benning as well, who's played a lot in the NHL over his career. Pretty solid piece of work, I would say, for Brad Treliving. Let's break. Let's come back. Let's tee up tonight's game. Leafs and Kraken. Funny enough, though, Liljegren, a point per game throughout his career against the Seattle Kraken, and won't get a chance to add to those totals. 1 goal, 4 assists for 5 points through 5 games against the Kraken in his career, +5 as well. But won't be able to add to those totals. But I guess actually he's heading out west. He's not going to be in their division. So good for San Jose, I guess. Could be good for San Jose. But we'll
Yeah.
come back. We'll tee up the game on the other side, and it's Halloween, so we're gonna do a little trick or treat. Well, it's good, basically cosign, no sign, but Halloween edition trick or treat. So that'll be coming up in a little bit as well. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NHL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti with me as always here on the show. We've got new episodes coming out to you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. Wherever you get a podcast and also up on YouTube, it's the Locked On Leafs podcast. We got the Leafs back in action tonight. They've been off for a couple of days, so it'll be nice to get some Leaf Kraken action tonight. Toronto has pretty much like they've played down to their opponent a lot throughout the last few years, throughout the Sheldon Keefe era. They have not done that to the Seattle Kraken, though. They're 5-1 against the Kraken since Seattle came into the league a few years ago.
Yeah, there's just been some really weird games between these two teams, right? Like I just remember last year, was it last year's game in Seattle? There was like one game in Seattle where Toronto went on to like a big lead. Seattle was pushing back. I remember also the Jared McCann game against the Leafs in Toronto after the whole deal with him being the exposing the expansion draft to go to Seattle. Jared McCann would look pretty good on this Leafs team.
He would. He would.
Over a guy like Alex Kerfoot. Just
or Justin Hall. I believe Justin Hall was like the main culprit, but anywho, we don't need to relive those mistakes made by a former general manager no longer with the team. But yeah, like there's obviously going to be storylines going into this one. I think you look at Toronto and Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner always play well in these games as well. Like Marner has 13 points in 6 games against the Kraken. Matthews 6 goals in 6 games against the Kraken. So could this be the night that line pops and goes off and has like a night where all three, Marner, Matthews, and Nyes, go off for like 11 points between them, a couple goals from Matthews, a goal from Marner, one from Nyes. Maybe they kind of factor in on the power play at some point tonight, which they've had a lot of success against the Kraken in the last 3 years. This should be like a point night kind of deal for Toronto, I think, tonight to try and get things going back in the right direction.
Well, I mean, after a pretty good game against Winnipeg that seemed to ease a lot of, concerns after the 3-game losing streak. But you also have a Kraken team that just came off. I mean, you take it with a little bit of grain of salt that they had an 8-2 victory over the Montreal Canadiens, but they also just had an 8-2 victory over the Montreal Canadiens. So you got to be mindful of that. I mean, Brandon Montour, hat trick.
Yeah, it's not every day you see defensemen getting a hat trick. But they lost 3 games before that, right? Like to good teams like Carolina, Winnipeg, Colorado. Those are good teams. But they blew the doors off of Montreal the other night, and they're coming into Toronto. So the Maple Leafs try and defend home ice, and they've had a lot of success against this team before, like I said, and they'll hope to keep it rolling tonight.
And I'm going to be at the game too, so they better not give me a stinker as well.
Well, no, that means that you're going to overtime.
Yeah, it's either going to be an OT game. I actually know who I'm going with. It's most likely going to be an OT game.
Because what's the record? Like 3 of the last 5 games you've been to, or 4 of the last 5 gone to overtime?
At least.
Yeah.
If we're counting just regular season, then yes. I'm not counting preseason into that. That's just
take that information and do what you will people who utilize FanDuel.
FanDuel.
Yes, take that information. Toronto heavily favored though. Look at that, minus 210 on the money line tonight.
Wow.
So heavily favored, but we've seen them heavily favored before and not come away with the victory. Hopefully tonight is not the case. All right. Anything else that you want to bring up about this game? Anyone on the other side you're looking forward to watching? Shane Wright. See what Shane Wright can do.
Yeah.
Kind of his first full season in the show this year. I'm kind of excited to see what he's got, what he can put together.
Yeah, I mean he's a player that has had a lot to prove. Considering how that draft went, his kind of mindset, and they tried really hard to get him in the best position possible to succeed. Right, they didn't want him to go back for another year juniors, but didn't really have the eligibility. So yeah, I think that's a player there who's it hasn't been a great start, but he's coming into his own.
He's only got 1 goal in the first 10 games.
Yeah.
Like he does need to pick it up, or else it's gonna start getting real loud if Shane Wright can't get it going.
Well, see, the thing is, they brought in a Chandler Stevenson to not force a guy like Shane Wright to play a lot. Matty Beniers has been playing. He's a guy that's been frustrating in fantasy because he's off the cold start. Now he's gone, kind of picking his game up a bit here. So, if you're the Leafs and you want to know who to look at on this team, it's Montour, it's McCann, even Jordan Eberle's 6 goals in 10 games as the captain. Some people might not even realize Jordan Eberle's the captain of the Seattle Kraken. Yeah, so that's nice, a little nod there to him. But yeah, I am. It's a team that's they got some good pieces, but I just think they're still missing a bit of star power there.
For sure. Yeah, that's totally fair. They do need an extra, a number one defenseman and a number one top scoring forward. Like when Jared McCann's your leading goal scorer every year, and Adam Larson's your best defenseman. It's not gonna. You're not gonna be a terrific team, I guess you could say. So they are missing a little bit of that talent, but should be an entertaining game tonight nonetheless. So we'll see what ends up happening there. I think it's a 7:00 puck drop tonight in Toronto, so should be a good game. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll play some trick or treat on a Halloween Thursday. It's coming up next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured, or if your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return. PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. PrizePicks puts its members first, with all withdrawals are being fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. If you big day today, Maple Leafs making a trade, sending out Timothy Liljegren to the San Jose Sharks, getting some much needed cap relief in exchange, and also getting a Matt Benning, who may or may not be with the Leafs. That was not announced to this point, but there's a lot of depth there, right? There's a lot of depth now on defense. You've got Timmins, Hakanpää's coming back into the mix in the next couple of days. Obviously, they like what they've seen out of Phil Myers throughout the last few weeks here, working with Toronto. So we'll see what ends up happening with Benning. All right, let's play some trick or treat. Basically, we're going to make some statements to each other. If we agree with it, we'll say, that's a treat. That's a treat. That's correct. And if we disagree, no, it's a trick. That's a trick that's happening right now. So I've got a bunch. If you've got a couple, you can sprinkle them in as well. Um, I'll start though, and it's going to be Maple Leafs related for this first one here. Funny enough, we haven't brought this up in the last couple of games, so I find funny. I think it actually speaks volumes to what's going on in the goalie department that we haven't really contemplated who's going to start because it's just kind of assumed it's going to be Stolarz, correct?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah,
Right.
right. So trick or treat. What we've seen from Anthony Stolarz is real, and he is a quality number 1A goaltender in the NHL.
Um, I am going to say treat. I think
Yeah,
when
believer?
well, I mean, the thing is goaltending now, especially in the NHL, size has become so paramount. Like more so than I think we've seen. Like you got to fill more. These shooters are too good, right? You leave any opening for them, they're gonna find a way to bury the puck, right? So, what makes him such a tough goalie to go up against is his size because he covers a lot of the net, but it's also his ability to get the second chance, right, to cover up and make those second opportunities. That's what I really like about him, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it. And now we're obviously the last couple games he hasn't exactly been stealing games, right? I think for, the Boston game, he gave them every opportunity to win that game, but it's I wasn't expecting to be a 940 save percentage goalie, but I do think that when we were talking about concerns for this team, or a lot of people talking about concerns for the goaltending, hasn't been the case. I think he's changed the narrative a lot about this team's goaltending, and the fact that, as you said, it hasn't been a talking point speaks, I think, very volumes about where his game is at right now.
Austin Matthews has just 4 goals on the season. Is this just a trick, a dirty trick, or is this a terrible treat like pencils or something?
Oh, this is a terrible trick on him because he's just gonna start throwing it at goalies, and it's gonna like for me, it's like there's some players right now that are going like off the charts right now with their scoring, like Ross Colton. I mean, now he's injured,
Now he's
but
out 6 to 8 weeks, but yeah, he
kind
had like
of
7
six
or
eight
8 goals.
weeks. But like guys like him were thriving to start the year. But as we've seen with elite goal scorers, it's not about how you start sometimes. It's just about that consistency and when a real going on those long stretches where everything's going right for you. Like, and Austin Matthews has had stretches where, last year I think we got a little spoiled with a few
Yeah.
hat tricks in the first couple of games that really got him started off. But for him, it's going to come rapidly and it's going to be consistent. And that's what we've always expected from him. So yeah, I'm sure people don't like seeing it's only 4 goals for him, but once the power play starts get going, right? I think that's where it's missing because he's not really I think he has 1 goal in the power play.
Yes, 1 power play goal, yeah.
I
Not
think
enough.
that's where you're going to expect to see that production start to go up is once he gets on. Hey, Ross
Well,
Colton has more power play goals than
he's he's
Austin
been the
Matthews.
he's been the big, like, proponent of guy who's scored at 5-on-5 and even
Exactly.
strength,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
true.
he's been that guy since he got into the NHL realistically, oddly enough. Like, power play goals hasn't necessarily been where he's gotten his cookies. He's packed it on at 5-on-5. He had 51 goals, at even strength last year, which obviously led the league. Only 18 of them on the power play. The year before, only 13 goals on the power play. So, it's not like he relies on the power play like a Sam Reinhart does, where half of his goals, more than
Sure.
half of them, are on the power play. He had, what, like 29, 30 power play goals last year, and then like 25 regular goals at even strength. So, but yes, to me, I'm looking at the shooting percentage. Like, he's got a career shooting percentage of 16%. And right now it's sitting at 8.5%. So it's nearly half of what his career average is. So look, what always happens, and it happens to players who get off to slow starts every year, the law of averages evens out at some point. And it's the exact same when it's the opposite, where you've got guys shooting the lights out and they're usually shooting like 28% through the first month of the season. They usually do not end anywhere near that number. Go look at Alex DeBrinket's number last year when he started out hot for the Detroit Red Wings. So I think it's not going to be at 8.5%. It'll get up into the 16, 17, 18% range where it's been primarily for the last 5 years, except for that 40 goal off season that we call it. Outside of that, he's been shooting the lights out. So, yeah, I think we should expect a big uptick coming soon, and maybe even tonight against Seattle Kraken.
It'd be nice,
It
right?
would be nice. Yeah.
So,
You got one for me?
all right, trick or treat. This won't be the last trade we see the Leafs make in the next little while. This won't be the last trade to see the Leafs make within the next few weeks. I think there's another trade coming.
So let's say till like American Thanksgiving.
Yeah, within the next month.
Interesting. Very interesting. I think you're tricking me there. I could see one more move up their sleeve because I went to Puckpedia. I started playing around with the numbers and playing around with the GM mode, and it's like there's too many players. And now it's not necessarily a massive cap situation. Liljegren kind of fixed the cap problem, but now you have literally a roster problem where you can only have 23 active players on your roster, but you've got like 26, 27 guys. Like there are 23 on the team right now. That's without Hakanpää, without Yarncroc, and without Dewar. And all three of those guys, I would imagine, the Leafs plan to put on their active roster when they're healthy, which means there's three players who are there now that will not be. So you could try and squeak all of those guys through waivers, or you could try and get something for them, knowing that they probably won't. And I think a trade may be likely over the next few weeks before making those moves. So I'm gonna say that's a trick, buddy. I think there'll be another move to come at some point over the next few weeks.
Who do you expect to be that next one that's got the bullseye on their back? Who's the next Liljegren?
The easy answer, I guess, would be David Kampf, probably, because I think there's a few players who could take that role as a fourth line center, like Pontus Holmberg, who's only making 800,000, is a lot cheaper, and he could fill in and do that role fine. Steven Lorenz can move into the middle. Like there's just enough guys. Connor Dewar plays center as well. He could take over that role for sure. So that would be the one guy who I think is like expendable and makes too much money that the Leafs could move. Now that's a much more difficult trade to make considering the contract. So, maybe they do move off of maybe it's Holmberg. Maybe it is Holmberg that they move off from, and another team's like, yeah, we could scoop him up for cheap as a fourth line center. Or maybe it's Nick Robertson, who, is kind of finding his way down lower and lower in the lineup, not getting those opportunities in the top six, not getting those opportunities, on the top power play units. So maybe it's Robertson who eventually, he asked for a trade a couple of months ago, didn't come to fruition. Maybe a team finally ponies up, or now they're at a situation where they've got, kind of their backs up against the wall when it comes to having to make some roster decisions. Maybe that's now when they finally move off from Robertson. So I think maybe those would be the two guys who are most likely, I would say, if I had to wager on two guys who get dealt, or three guys, I suppose, Robertson, Dewar, or Robertson, Holmberg, and Kampf.
Yeah, and Robertson's set to be a healthy scratch again.
Exactly. And that's where it's falling in the same bucket as Liljegren, where it's like, if you're not going to use him, trade him, because I bet you there are teams around the league, and he's actually on a decent contract. So and he could score. He just needs opportunity. Kind of surprised that San Jose didn't bite, where it's like, we'll take Liljegren. Let's also take Nicky Bobby as well. Try and make something happen there.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised me that they didn't, or maybe they tried, but Toronto wasn't willing to just throw him into a deal, obviously.
I think David Pagnotta actually also was on the Leaf Morning Take with Alberga, and he mentioned Robertson's name. He also mentioned Yarncroc's name, but the only reason why I would even consider moving Yarncroc is the fact that he's always hurt now. Other than that, on the ice, I'll take a Yarncroc anytime, but he's not been available the last year he had those two injuries.
Yep.
This year, I don't even know what the injury is that's keeping him out.
Yeah, he got hurt. Was weird is like it was a day-to-day thing, and then it turned into actually he's on LTIR and he's gonna miss the first month of the season. It's like, what? It was a
And
lower
they
body.
haven't seen him either, right? Like that's the other thing. You haven't really
Yeah, I don't
seen
know.
him.
I don't know.
This
I
is
don't
this
know.
is like a Robot Island situation with Yarncrook. Like, what's going on here, guys?
Doubt it. I doubt it. I don't think we're gonna. I don't think it's quite Robada Island esque. I think we will see him at some point here. But I think Hakanpää is right around the corner, man. I could see him coming in. It won't be sorry. It won't be tonight against Seattle because they're unable to activate them tonight. But come Saturday against St. Louis, they're all able to be activated. Right?
The
They'll have
fact that
done
they're
their
letting him
24.
speak to the media to kind of suggests something is
He's
imminent
close.
with him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's close. He's close. So wouldn't be shocked if he's playing in St. Louis. Wouldn't be shocked at all. All right. I think that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs on Twitter. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow to recap tonight's Leafs and Kraken game. Enjoy it. Go Leafs, go. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.